You know, it's been said that the sewer systems are what make the modern civilized life possible. And that must mean that the last 4 months I've been living in my bus has been neither modern nor civilized, but today we're gonna change that. We got a break in the action at the shop. I got my bus in today, and we are going to be roughing in the gray water system on my own personal rig. Now, along the way, we're gonna have to install a shower pan. I hope that's all right with you, but just the way these things are connected, that's how it's gonna go. I'm gonna share some tips and tricks, a couple of different materials you might not know about that might be helpful to you. And hopefully at the end of the day, I will have a shower pan and a bunch of pipes in it so that we can make sure the shit rolls downhill. My name's Chuck Cassidy, don't go anywhere. All right, well, before we get started, you know we better talk about the tools and materials you're gonna need before you start the job of installing a custom stainless shower pan and roughing in your gray water lines. This shower pan is where I will begin. This is a custom 16 gauge stainless steel shower pan I had made for me by a shop local to me in Colorado, Broomfield Sheet Metal. And they made it to my specifications, the exact size I wanted, and put the drain exactly where I wanted. And that is something that's very important to me. When we are installing our shower pans, oftentimes they are the lowest point in the gray water system, which means that they are already so low that the distance between the outlet of that shower and where your gray tank is, you only have maybe 3 or 4 inches of total drop to work with, and if you're trying to maintain slope, that means you want to be coming out as close to the gray tank, if not on top of it, as possible, which means putting the shower drain right where you want it. Now, of course, you could use a prefab pan, and if you can get that drain location to work for you, awesome for you. Otherwise, something like this or making your own pan is probably in the works. This was around, I think, $750 when I picked it up. And it's got the drain right where I want it, so it can hopefully go right into the top of my gray tank. I really love that. Now, the drain that I'm using, this is just a normal drain that you would put on any type of preformed shower pan, fiberglass or otherwise. It's made by Odie. I like this one, if I can get it off, because it's made of brass, whereas most other types of shower drains like this are plastic. I don't know, call me crazy, but I prefer this nice piece of brass, and it's got the sealing ring, and I'm going to be putting a little layer of plumber's putty behind this when I drop it into my shower pan and install it, so you want to pick up some of that as well. In the directions they say silicone, but then on another page they said plumber's putty, and you know I don't like silicone, so I can tell you what I'll be using. That plumber's putty. Now, the next decision you've got to make after you figure out your placement and arrangement and the shower pan and all that is what you're going to use to do this plumbing with. And there are 2 main options. Of course, if you're creative, I'm sure you could plumb it with a whole lot of other things. But the 2 main options are going to be your black ABS and your white PVC. Now, they're both about the same price. If you Google which one's better, you will be led down a rabbit hole of many conflicting opinions. The short answer is they both are great, and I don't think you would regret using either. The ABS is claimed to be more durable and more flexible, I believe, but then I think they're saying the PVC is somehow like more stronger, but it's a little more brittle. So I don't know. Take your pick. You can't go wrong. I'm using PVC, but if I was using ABS, I'd still be a happy guy. Moving on, you want to make sure, of course, you have the appropriate fittings you're going to need. And let me just a little word to the wise here. If you take a look at this fitting, this is an elbow, right? A 90-degree turn. And compare the radius on that to this guy. And then there's one that's even bigger that's got a long bend on it. Now, these are all this way for a reason. And if you have any questions about what's the appropriate fitting to use in a circumstance, you can hit up the internet and you'll find pretty clear answers on when to use the tight bends or the long turns, depending on if you're going from vertical to horizontal or turning on a horizontal. But I can tell you, these super sharp ones are usually always meant for venting plumbing applications. They're not meant for liquid to pass through because the bend is so sharp. Now, in a pinch, yeah, I would use one. But if you can avoid it, well, it's like the right way to do things, and that's what we're trying for. The next thing I want to get into are the traps. Now, a water trap or a P trap in a conventional home is there to keep methane from the sewer and all those smells from getting up into your home through the drain lines that are connected to the sewer. A conventional trap like this one, although this is an S trap and they're kind of like you're not supposed to do them this way. Water gathers in the low point here, and that puddle of water prevents anything from going through, and then as you drain, the water flushes through, and you're great. Now, you can use those in a Skoolie, and I'm probably going to use a couple of them myself on the sinks because They're simple, they almost never fail, but they do have a few drawbacks. One is that they take up a lot of space, okay? They also need to be installed in a vertical position. You need to have the water coming in at the top and then exiting either out the side or out the bottom if you have a vent. So that's another, tricky part in the installation, especially as I mentioned earlier, if we're putting this under the bus or coming out of the shower pan, we might not have this much height to work with. Furthermore, since they're filled with water, going down the road, the water can slosh out, and if your bus is ever subjected to cold temps, they can freeze. To remedy that, there is an answer. This is called a HEPVO, waterless trap, and it uses a little membrane in there, and I'll give you a close-up, that allows the flow of water and gases one direction, but not the other. What's very cool about these, aside from the fact that they can't freeze and there's no water to slosh out, they can be installed vertical and they can also be installed horizontal. So if you come out of your shower and need to hit a trap and then get into your tank ASAP, you can put one of these in line and it's going to do the job for you. Now, some folks have had issues with these. If you use them on a trap for a urine diverter, for example, there are reports of the urea crystallizing in there and causing those membranes not to seal very well. And I would consider them a maintenance item. They will need to be replaced periodically, so don't bury these somewhere where you can't change them. That would be a major bummer. Now, as much as I love them, I'm probably going to stick with conventional traps in a couple of locations below my sinks. But we'll see when the time comes when I'm installing those sinks if I have the room for them or not. I don't know. We don't need to worry about that because today we're just roughing in. Now, if you're installing that pipe, you definitely want some ways to secure it and hang it. I've got these are conduit clamps actually that I really like. These are for 1.5" conduit, but they work great on our 1.5" PVC. They just fit right over like that and secure it really well. And then under the bus, you can use these. You can also use they would call it plumber's tape, but it's basically a metal strip with a bunch of holes in it that you can cut to length, put screws through the holes to hold things up. That's a very easy, standard way to hang things, especially if you have them coming at different heights. I'll grab some. I've got some here, I know. Oh, Chuck's bag of tricks. There it is. You thought I didn't have any. It looks like this. It's cool, It's not my favorite way to do things, but there's a time and a place, no doubt, and you might need to use that. The last things that you're going to need if you're going to take this job on, in addition to ways to mount and hang the pipe, you need to make sure you have the appropriate glue for gluing it. ABS takes a different glue than PVC. If you're using PVC, most of the times you're supposed to use a primer first to prime the joint, and then you glue it up. So you want to make sure that you have some of this on hand. And if you don't have any fresh, just get some fresh stuff because it does go bad. I know, believe it or not. And outside of that, I'm going to show you a couple little cool doodads that I have. This is another type of trap, if you will. Again, you wouldn't be able to use this in a house, but in a bus you certainly can. And it works just like the HEPVO does. It's basically just a drop-in diaphragm. And I'm actually going to be using this in my shower because coming out of the pan, I don't have room for a P-trap. I also don't have room for a HEPVO, at least not the way I currently have things planned. So this, I'm hoping will do the trick, and it's easy to put in. You just take the grate off, drop it in, put the grate on, and you're good to go. It's made by Odie. I think it was about 20 bucks. And the cool thing is, if it fails, to replace it, all I do is pop the grill off my shower drain and put a new one in. It's pretty handy. So we'll see if that works. I definitely don't want the smells of my gray tank, but I'm not super worried about it. Aside from the inconvenience, it's not as dangerous, right, as not having a working trap in a house that's connected to a sewer system. Well, aside from a saw, measuring tape, pencils, and a positive winning attitude, and of course, your safety specs, that's all you need if you're going to take this job on. So let's get started, shall we? I almost forgot. How foolish of me. Every bus converter's best friend is an assortment of hole saws, and you're definitely going to need some if you're going to be making holes in walls and floors to run your pipe through. So grab yourself a nice kit. Thanks, Brianna, for letting me borrow and kind of ruin yours. Okay, now we can get to work. All right, so I'm coming to you live from what would be the kitchen of my bus, and this right here is the kitchen sink. It'll be centered right below that window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the drain line from the kitchen sink down through the bathroom wall into the space in the floor that is below the raised floor. I'm raising the floor to the top of this wheel well here. It's gonna run down through this, and then it's gonna pick up the shower drain, which is in the back of the shower stall. It's gonna tee into there, or Y into it, I guess, and then drop straight into my gray tank, which will be mounted basically right below the shower drain. The bathroom sink, which is here, is actually going to have its piping run sideways, forwards of all directions, and catch the stack that is serving the kitchen sink and then drain down through that and catch up with it here. Reason being, I didn't have room. This wheel well, there's only about 1 inch of spray foam over there, and I didn't have room to try to hide a pipe below the floor. I didn't really want to do a big ugly one off to the side or anything like that. So this was my best solution. Judge me if you want, but it's what I'm doing. Today we're gonna hopefully, since some of this plumbing has to go under the shower pan, we're gonna get the shower pan installed, and that's gonna also contain the fitting that drops out through the floor, and then put our first little run of pipe in and probably dry fit the rest of that run up. And I'm not gonna glue that stuff in place quite yet because I'm still working out how I wanna handle the urine diverter for my composting toilet. And that's something that's gonna be different for just about everybody. So sorry if when I get to that, if it's not applicable to you, but a lot of people will use a HEPFO or other type of trap there. And that's a good call because you don't want those odors getting into your bus. And the reason I'm not doing it yet is because I haven't yet decided how I want to handle that in my OGO composting toilet. Yeah. All right, well, we're gonna go prep the stainless shower pan and get all of that set up and test fit our fittings. We'll glue them together, we'll put the pan in, and then hopefully we'll have our runs coming up from the bottom of the bus and into the living space. All right, so we've got the pan mocked up, and I just want to show you how I'm figuring out this drain orientation and everything. So I've got my drain dry fit, and then down here, this is the block simulating the height of the pan in my bus. And this is what we've got going on. It's gonna go out through that hole and straight into my gray water tank. It might do an elbow. I gotta figure out exactly what I'm doing there. And then this right here is gonna be coming in from the bathroom fixture and the kitchen fixture, those two drains. Oh, and the urine diverter. All that's gonna be coming into here. And so I need to know how much bigger that hole is gonna be. What I'm using is a straight edge across the table to simulate my floor height. And I'm giving myself a little bit of lee room, if you can see there, but then I went ahead and traced that line all the way across this pipe, just so I can get an idea, you know, of what that's gonna look like. So I'm gonna go inside in the bus, and I'm gonna carve this opening out, and I'll show you, let's see, it's gonna be, that's roughly center line of our 5-inch, well, we'll just say we've got a 5-inch diameter hole, and that's our center line there. And that little dotted line ends at around 6.5. So I'm probably gonna go just 7 inches from the left side edge of the hole and carve that out. And our diameter of the pipe here, we're right around, well, we'll just call it 3 inches wide to give ourselves plenty of room. But you know, the taper of the pipe, all that. I just don't want there to be any pressure on this fitting here. Let's go make that hole. All right, we've got the initial hole made. This is the 5-inch hole going down, and hey, there's a little, that's what my floor looks like. That's 4 inches of insulation and then the 3/4 inch Advantech. Now, because I have that Y coming out, I'm gonna have to carve this back a bit, and I measured on the pipe and got it all marked out. So I'm gonna carve that out, and then this opening is ready. I'm gonna have to drill my final exit hole, and that should be all we gotta do for this to be ready for the pan to drop in. I'm gonna vac this up and install my braces, and then we're ready to start roughing in all of our fresh water through these openings. And shoot, I think it'll be time to drop that pan in. Here you can see the chassis saver. This is the plug out. And when you prep the surface properly and use chassis saver, it sticks really well, and the glue sticks really well. The glue held, and it was the foam that broke when I was having to scrape the pieces off. And the same goes with the Advantech here. You can see it was the foam had to be ripped off of and like just ripped off of itself, I guess. That's what you want. You don't want to see any lifting. All right, this hole is cut, and I'm pretty pleased with how this is looking. You can see if I center it perfectly in the hole, I've got a lot of room for this to kind of move around, and that's what I want. I don't really want this to be touching the wood or anything. And after this is all said and done, and I've leak tested this, I'm gonna get some of that great stuff spray foam, not the hardcore stuff that I really like, but the great stuff, and I'm just gonna fill it in here. So that way, if I ever have to service it, I can scrape all that stuff out, and great stuff foam is not nearly as dense as this stuff is. So that should be relatively easy to scrape out should I ever need to service this, although I really hope that day never comes, because that would be a bit of a bummer, I'll say. And there will be a metal cover. I'm gonna make a metal patch that'll be tight fitting around the pipe to seal that. I don't want, this is where mice would come in, you know? Now that this is all figured out, I think I'm good to go ahead and vacuum up my freaking mess. Real quick, I want to talk about this hole placement. So, you know, I have these shower pans made custom so they can be any shape I want, and so I can put the hole wherever I want them. And what I wanted was a center mounted gray tank because I want storage compartments on either side. So the gray tank is going in the middle, and I needed and wanted a straight drop into it from above. And I didn't want to make my shower any wider. And so I talked to the shop that makes them and asked how close I could put the drain on a sloped pan to the side. And they gave me the number. It was like I think it was 4.5 inches or something. So I went under there and measured everything, and it's just barely gonna work. That's the frame rail right there. But the center of it, I don't know if you can really see very clearly, but 1.5-inch pipe will come out and just be on the left, our left, of that frame rail. This is a little rubber piece I'm gonna trim back so it's out of the way, but just shooting the gap there. But that's what it takes. I'm trying to eke every inch of performance I can out of this build, so that's why I had to notch the wheel well there for my pan to drop in a little bit, because I really wanted to have outdoor underneath storage compartments on both sides. And a center mounted gray tank. Whew. Little word on that. That's why it's all crazy though. All right, so we've got our little sloping pan supports all screwed and glued into position. I'm gonna go grab some PEX and get my water lines roughed in. And then I think we'll be good. I'm gonna pre-drill the shower pan where I'm securing it around the perimeter, but then I think we'll be good to put our glue down and drop the pan in. That's a scary, kind of exciting thing, you know? Okay, we've got our freshwater PEX lines plumbed in here, and they're running from the back where my water tank and water heater will be out up into the kitchen. And I'm gonna come back through this wall up here for my bathroom supply lines along with my bathroom drain, which is all gonna come from here, the kitchen zone. And then this is just my little opening. My water tank and water heater are all gonna be back in this area. So I left it long. Well, before we get too far into this video, I just want to tell you about the bus fair. It's happening this June 21st through 23rd in Oak Ridge, Oregon. I'm gonna be there. I put together a whole day of seminars about how to build a bus, how to buy a bus, how to drive a bus, anything bus. We're talking about it, and I'd love to see you there. Check it out at thebusfair.com. Get your tickets quick. All right. Well, now that we've got those blocks installed and we're ready to put this shower pan in, let's go ahead and get our drain assembly installed, because obviously it's gonna be a lot harder to do once that pan is in place. So this, again, is just a drain for a prefabricated shower pan. They say fiberglass, but it works great on steel, anything that's like this. Let me explain how this works. I'm gonna put a little bit of plumber's putty on the back, and then that sets in on the drain. Then on the back side, there is this locking ring that we will install. And the order goes locking ring, then this fiber kind of paper gasket, and then the rubber gasket. And it actually seals and has its main watertight seal on the outside on the bottom of the pan. So hopefully it's catching anything that runs around the plumber's putty. The plumber's putty is certainly going to do work, but it's not the end of the line, basically. On the inside there is this rubber kind of grip thing that goes around the 2-inch pipe that you stick up into. You can use it with ABS or PVC because it's a mechanical connection. And then there is a locking ring that you tighten down, and it basically wedges this rubber gasket against the pipe and seals it. So we're going to go ahead and get this installed, and then once this is in place, and we're going to go ahead and install this onto our drain fixture, and then we'll be ready to lay some adhesive down and drop the pan into place and run a couple more lines of plumbing. Here we go. What is plumber's putty anyways, you know? It's kind of strange stuff. All right, so we got this nice and evenly around the sides of the drain. We're gonna drop that into place. Keep it nice and centered if we can. That looks pretty good. All right, now I'm gonna take our clamp ring, the fiber gasket, and then the rubber gasket, and thread that on from underneath and pinch the pan. And what I'm gonna do, once I get this on here nice and tight, is I'm gonna grab a wrench. I'm gonna use a strap wrench probably, and cinch that nut down really good, because we wanna squeeze this plumber's putty very thoroughly, and we don't want to be twisting the drain. We don't want the drain body to turn. That's not a desired outcome. It's looking pretty good. Let me go grab that wrench. All right, I've got my strap wrench here, and we'll just thread that over this large nut and get a couple more turns on it. Oh, that strap wrench doesn't work that great. See if we can get these around it. Oh yeah, they're gripping the little tabs here. Looks nice. Whew! That was it. Okay, we've got that drain mounted with our plumber's putty, and it's gripping it real tight, and it's in nice and snug down here. So now we're gonna go ahead and glue up our PVC pieces. If you remember earlier, we had that piece of PVC with the Y that's combining our line from the kitchen and bath with our shower vertical and then dropping out into the tank. So let's go ahead and glue up these fittings that are going on here, because we're gonna install this with the shower pan, and we're gonna wanna make sure that all this is ready to go, because it's gonna be hard to get to when it's under the pan. I've got my glue and my primer, and I'll just show you some of the pieces that we're using. So the drain coming into this is going to be connected using this piece of 2-inch pipe right there, and then that goes into the bottom of our drain assembly. Then coming out of this and going into our tank, I want to go from this 2-inch pipe back to 1.5 inches, which is typically bad practice in plumbing, but because all of these appliances or fixtures are low flow, I'm not worried. I'm really not worried. And 1.5 inch size fittings are what I have for going into the tank with, and it's going to make my life a little bit easier to just do it that way. Nothing wrong with sticking with 2-inch going into the tank, but that's not how I'm doing it. So I'm going to have this reducer that goes on there. Now this, I don't know the name of this. I think it's just called a reducer. This takes from 2 inches down to 1.5 inches. That's also what this does. This is a bushing, and it goes up inside the pipe. But you don't really, at least from what I've been told by plumbers, and I'm not a plumber, want to use these in the direction of flow, because it makes it basically a hard stop in here where the reducer is that things are gonna hit. Whereas this has a bit of a slope and it's smooth and tapered. That being said, where we have our lines coming in from the kitchen and bathroom sinks, I am gonna use a bushing, because that's gonna be going with the flow, going from a smaller pipe to a larger one, and that'll let me run my 1.5 inches coming into this, which is what I wanna do. 1.5 inches is more than enough for the kitchen and the bathroom sinks. Now, of course, you could do something crazy and run 1.25 inches or whatever. I can't say I recommend it, but I don't think it would be a problem. You might have a difficult time finding the appropriate non-vent style fittings for 1¼ pipe though, that's for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue these up and glue them together. The nice thing about these is because of the way these connections are, it doesn't matter, they're all round. There's no orientation. You don't really have to care too much about that. A word to the wise too, when you're cutting your pipe, I just use a chop saw, you know, nothing too crazy there. But you'll want to make sure that you put a chamfer or a bevel on your edges. And call me crude, but the way I do that is with an angle grinder, and I just knock down the corners on that real quick. So I'll just take care of that for this last piece, and then we can glue this all up. All right, I don't know if you can see, but we knocked those edges down pretty good on there. That being said, we can now start gluing everything up, and we'll get our primer out. And it's worth bearing in mind, sometimes these caps get stuck, and this little tool they sell, I'm convinced it's a scam to figure out a way to just sell you one more thing. But it's a tool just for opening the caps of these frickin' glue containers. Is it necessary? I don't know. It's nice to have one now that I do. This purple primer that you're gonna be using, it stains, so be careful when you're using it. And I'm gonna start with the bottom fitting and just kind of work my way up and get going here. All right, yeah, just as I suspected. So while the surfaces are wet, you want to go ahead and hit it with your glue on both surfaces here. And I'm gluing up 3 things right now. I'm gluing up the reducer to our Y, and then I'm also got this little pipe that connects them together. So it's 3 pieces that I'm gluing right now. That is a smell. And I like to come back and hit the first fitting that I did just to make sure everything's nice and juicy. We'll put them together, and now you got to get them together quick. Oh, perfect. And this stuff sets up very fast. You only have maybe 10 or so seconds to do what you're gonna do before it becomes permanent. Looks like I cut that perfectly. Almost closed the gap completely, but I know we bottomed out, so that's good. All right, so that's our first fitting in. Now I gotta put the bushing in, and then I'm gonna pop in this top piece that connects to our drain. It's messy work. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay. And then our last fitting for this segment is the reducer. The bushing, not the reducer. I believe what's happening when you do this, it's a chemical reaction that essentially welds, it melts the plastic together. I think I did it without getting any on my shirt though. That's nice. So there's our little assembly that's gonna get clamped up into the shower pan, like so. And that's gonna connect to our kitchen and bathroom sinks. Shower pan's gonna go here, and then out to our gray tank there. Okay, so we've got our assembly here, and this is gonna come up through this hole, and then we've got our rubber sealing grommet thing, and it's got a tapered end that goes down. So we'll put that over the pipe and bottom that out. And now this is the locking ring that we're gonna tighten down, and it's gonna force that wedge on this gasket to seal around our pipe. I wanna make sure I've got that just how I want it. Now this is a little unconventional, I'll be the first to admit, but this is a system that has worked well for buses that we've done in the past. And then it comes with this little tool that you set in there, and then you can use a screwdriver to tighten that ring down and secure it nice and tight around the pipe. So with that done, I think it's time to go put some adhesive in and we can drop this pan down. It's worth noting what I'm trying for my trap. I don't have space, or I could make space, but I'm really trying to do an elegant solution here, and we'll see if this lasts. These are from Odie. Now, you're not supposed to use these in place of a trap, and if I were doing this in a house, I would certainly pay heed, but really, I'm just doing this to keep smells out, and that's what this should be able to do, and they're easy to replace and exchange, but it just drops in there, and there's a little bit of light. It makes me a little concerned. We'll see how it does. I bought a couple in case some of them do better, and I might even like get to modding these to make them perform the way I want them to, because what it does is it allows me to just drop straight into my gray tank, which will be, it's probably about here. That's really cool. So then all of my gray water is just coming into one point, way high up. Very nice. Okay, we've got that glued up pipe assembly attached to the output of our drain, and this is ready to go. That's about the level that the floor is gonna be. And it looks really great. I'm very happy with it. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and throw down, I'm using some of this Gorilla Heavy Duty Ultimate Extreme, and we're just gonna put some fat beads around all the contact surfaces. The big point of this, like, I'm not worried about that shower pan going anywhere, especially because before I tile, I'm gonna put some screws in around the top, and you'll see that in another video. But this is really to just stick it to the wood and fill any gaps or imperfections in there so that when you step on the pan, it's not, you don't hear the pan like hitting on that when you step on it. So it's really just a filler, but we're gonna go and caulk that, and then we can set this pan down. No turning back. So putting the pan is an exciting, very exciting process because you only get one shot to do it clean. And it just went in. Let me show you how nice it looks. So we're set in here. Came out really good. Don't mind this piece of wood. I didn't put that in straight. But we're resting on our spots. We had good squeeze out of everything. And if you look in there, everybody's looking pretty happy. And there's our drain. Whew. All right, the next step, we're gonna go ahead and do our next couple pieces of PVC, and then we can call it. Let's show you how that ended up looking underneath here. You can see on my supports, it looks like it really bonded well. That looks really nice. Looking pretty good under here as well. So we're gonna go ahead and start our first run of plumbing. It's gonna connect into the middle of this pipe here and be our first run coming out. Just so you can see why I was so particular about my pan, that's where we're coming out, and this is our frame rail. But it's all gonna work out. I gotta trim this little piece of rubber. But then that should just drop us right into my tank, which will be mounted right here. It's nice and cozy, I'll tell you that much. Very happy with that result though. All right, about to glue this piece in. You only get one shot on this one because it's all under there. If I really bungled things, I need to do it while this glue is still not cured so I can tear this whole thing out. So wish me luck and keep this going. All right, we're just cruising along now. To maintain our slope, I cut a couple of different height riser blocks there, and those are pocket screwed and glued to the floor, and then I'm using those hangers to secure the pipe there. So now I've got a good slope, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut this last piece, and I don't think I'm gonna glue this in yet because I'm not sure how I'm gonna tie in the urine diverter for my composting toilet. But once I hit this, I cut this length so that this next section of pipe I can just attach directly to this wall, or this side of my wheel well box right there. And then this is all gonna be below the floor, and I'm gonna have an access panel here cut into the floor beneath the toilet so I can get into all this stuff if I ever need to mess with it or change the way my urine diverter is set up. So we'll cut those pieces, and then I think that's gonna do it. Here's a little tip for you. So this next bend, when I attach this elbow onto this pipe, it's gonna determine the slope that this run of pipe has. And I'm very specific about where I want that to end up because this is the hole I'm shooting for. And I want to end right about, I'd say something like that would be really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this length of pipe in here, but not glue it up. And we're only going to focus on gluing this joint. And while that glue is curing, I'm going to hold this in the correct position so the slope stays true. Now, another way you could do this would be to get everything lined up and then take a Sharpie and do a mark on the pipe and a mark on the fitting. And that way you know when you assemble this, as long as those marks line up, that you've got your timing correct on there. So we'll go ahead and get this glued up, and I think that's probably gonna do it for now. Okay, so we've got our runs coming out there, making the bend, having the slope. That last line will go out and catch the kitchen sink on the other side, but I think that's gonna do it. Well, before we call it a day, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, even though I'm not currently gonna do it. This is a test plug, and they make them for all different sizes of pipe. This is for 1.5 inches. And what you would do typically, or what I would do, is I would put this in the bottom of my drain tube and then fill the system with water and make sure we don't have any leaks. But I still have some other plumbing I'm gonna do, so I'm not quite ready for this. But if you're doing this yourself and you wanna make sure you're leak free, grab these. They're about $5 or so, and they just go in there, you screw the knob, and it like expands into place. And that's a great little tip for you. Well, that wasn't so bad. Got a little bit of glue on our hands and breathed a little bit of plastic dust, but hey, now we got a shower pan and our gray water lines are in place, ready to be hooked up to the gray tank. That'll be another video. And then have our final plumbing done where we install all the drains and traps. And well, we might do another video about that too. Of course, there's all the fresh water, well, and everything else we still gotta do on my bus. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Chuck Cassidy, and a big thanks to the supporters over on Patreon who really helped make this possible. Couldn't do it without you. We'll see you next week.